Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about those big time games over in the Big Ten this upcoming weekend, and we got three more for you real quick. The Friday Night Lights slate is really solid this upcoming weekend. We have one in particular that I'm very much looking forward to, but we got two others in some Power 4 conferences that I very much want to talk about, and we'll start with Houston-TCU. I think this line is too big, and I understand Houston has been not good this year thus far, but it just takes one Saturday, and I think TCU is one of those teams that has played really good football. They're liable to put up a stinker at some point. So this is one of those games that I understand the line is 17. I understand TCU is very favored and has played really good football recently, and Houston is 1-4 with only a win over Rice. It's just that one Saturday. We saw it against Houston, against Oklahoma. Things got a little bit interesting when we did not think it was going to. So this is one of those games that's definitely more in reach than Oklahoma was. I can promise you that. But they got to get Donovan Smith going. 5 picks on the year, only 2 passing touchdowns. That can't happen going forward. But some guys to watch in this game. Eric McAllister is a very interesting player for TCU because this guy can go. He can get downfield and make some big time plays for you, 20.1 yards per catch. He's one of those guys that can change this game in a hurry and possibly just bury Houston early on in this game if he can get behind this defense and make a big play. So he's one of those guys that might be a little bit unsung in that TCU offense, but is a very, very talented player, no doubt about that. Then you got Namdi Obizia. Obiazor, the linebacker for TCU, very talented player, very veteran, one of those guys that when you have Donovan Smith on the other side, you at the very least need to have a linebacker that can match him, that can make sure that he is staying in the pocket, make sure that he doesn't get loose, because this guy, if he gets his feet under him, is a very talented quarterback. He just hasn't been able to do it this year. So definitely something that Obiazor, is going to have to figure out this upcoming weekend, and he's going to have his hands full. There's no two ways about that. And then you got Joseph Manjack the fourth. He's a guy that Houston's just going to need to hit a couple of big plays, and if they can't get their wide receivers going in this game, it's going to be a nightmare. They can't just run the ball on TCU. They can't just lean on their defensive line and hope that they're going to come out on top. They're going to have to hit some big plays, and Joseph Manjack is going to be the guy that's likely going to get the ball a lot in this one. And then you got A.J. Housey. I think this is a guy that could change this game in a hurry. He's had a number of picks this year and could have a number of more throughout the rest of this year. And this could be a little bit of a coming out party for the very talented corner. I think it's one of those guys that maybe there's a couple of mistakes in TCU's bag, and maybe he's the guy that ends up changing this game in a hurry. And that's one of the keys to the game. Just get big plays. This is not a game where you're going to have a team grinding it out and you're going to have a team trying to hold on. You're going to have to hit a couple of big plays, especially if you're Houston, but TCU as well. You're going to have to get behind this defense because that's kind of what you do. Being able to get those explosive plays with Josh Hoover kind of coming into his own as your quarterback, that's going to be huge for this team. And then you got Houston's confidence. It has been a very, very bad start to the year. There's no two ways about that. How much energy does this Houston team have? Do they have the energy to go out there and compete in a big-time Big 12 game, or does TCU just bury them early on and this line looks a lot more normal than I thought it was to start this thing? But then you got TCU kind of finding themselves, at least offensively. They've scored 42 and 38 in the last 2 weeks. This offense is very dangerous, and it's one of those teams that absolutely could make some noise in this conference if they can get going. And this is one of those games where you really just need to take care of business and keep it moving. And I think they're going to do that. I think TCU is going to handle this one. I do think it's a little bit closer because I think Donovan Smith is just hasn't quite hit his stride, but he finds it on one Friday. He can absolutely make something happen. So it's going to be a really, really fun game, and definitely one of those that might be a little bit under the radar, but will be worth your time on Friday. I can promise you that. Then we got Oregon taking another step up. I realize now they say Saturday. They should say Friday. I apologize. But Oregon is favored by 24 in this game, but another step up in competition. They played UCLA last week. Now they play Aiden Childs, and it's going to get a little bit tougher. They're going to have to figure out a way to kind of keep him at bay, make sure he's in the pocket, which is something we'll talk about here in a second. But they have to make sure that they're ready to roll because they have a big one on the horizon, and if they lose this one, that one becomes a must-win in a hurry. And then you got Nick Marsh on the Michigan State side. This is a freshman, the leading receiver, one of those other freshmen that is just outright ridiculous at the wide receiver position. They're going to need some big plays. And I think Oregon's defense, or defensive backfield in particular, does have some holes in it. Now, it's going to be a little bit hard for Aiden Childs to find them, and he's been really good at finding other teams' jerseys, so got to be careful here. But at the end of the day, he is one of those guys, Nick Marsh in particular. There's not a cornerback in the country that's going to match up and be totally okay against this kid. I know he's a freshman. I know he's going up against his first big-time test. This is a very talented kid, and definitely a kid that can change this game in a hurry. And then you got Charles Brantley, a DB for Michigan State. He had a 100-yard INT against Prairie View A&M, excuse me. Very talented player, one of those guys that they're badly going to need a big play. By their defense, they're badly going to need one where maybe they take it back to the house, maybe they just set him up with a short field. Whatever it is, they're going to need that one play, and Charles Brantley, likely one of the few guys that can make it on that defense. Keon Sadiq is someone I want to talk about for Oregon just kind of going forward, because I think this offense is so dangerous in so many different ways. They can spread the ball out in a number of different ways. I think Sadiq's one of those guys that they're just going to keep having to feed the ball to because he's so dynamic at the tight end position. He's one of those guys that when you have all these wide receivers running around, when you have a million different things for the defense to worry about, he might just catch an underneath route and go 40 yards for a touchdown. He's so dynamic, one of those guys that I think if you want to expand this pass game a little bit more, he's someone that's going to get involved pretty early on in this one. And then Jeffrey Bassa. He's going to have his hands full with Aiden Childs in this game. A very, very good player. One of my favorite linebackers of the entire country. Absolutely flies around, and he's going to have to do that on Friday if he's going to be able to keep track of Aiden Childs. And that's a big part of this. Aiden Childs has to use his legs more. He has not necessarily been a huge factor with his legs this year, and they can't leave anything on the shelf in this game. They have to utilize every single play call that they have in their disposal. They have to make sure that they're putting them in a chance to win because as of right now, the offense that they've been kicking out there the first couple of weeks is not going to get them anywhere close in this one. So use everything you have. Put Aiden Childs on the outside and let him make a couple of big plays with his legs, and then maybe this thing gets a little bit more interesting. And then you do have the look-ahead factor. Oregon has the game of the year next week. There's no two ways about that. They've been looking forward to this one since January, pretty much. So Michigan State is one of those teams that maybe they're not a team you really have to worry about when they come up on the schedule in September, or in January, but they are a team that once you get to that game, maybe Michigan State throws the first punch. Maybe they have Oregon sitting somewhere that they really haven't been, at least against a really good team in Michigan State, or a really good team against a Power 4 team in Michigan State. They're going to have to be very, very careful. Maybe Michigan State can catch them sleeping just a little bit and get that big time lead, and then maybe it's a little bit harder for Oregon to get things going. And then you do have a little bit of embedded hate. You have Jonathan Smith, Jake Velling, Aiden Childs, and more that came over from Oregon State this past week. They hate Oregon. There's no two ways about that. They definitely want to get this win, and they've been circling this one for a while. Thing is, they are wildly outmatched in this game. I think Oregon's going to roll in this one. I think they continue to prove the point that they are turning a corner with that team, and I think it sets up an incredible matchup in Eugene next week. Definitely one that I cannot wait for, but I think Oregon handles business. Maybe they start a little bit slow in this one, and Michigan State has a lead at the end of the first, but then Oregon kind of turns it on and takes over in this one. And then we have the main event. This is an incredible game. This is Syracuse at UNLV, one that I don't know if we expected to see around this time of year being this big of a deal, but Syracuse played really good football. UNLV is one of the stories of college football right about now. So UNLV is favored in this game by 6 points. Definitely one that I cannot wait for. I think UNLV is an incredible team, obviously. They have two Power 4 wins, trying to make it 3 in this one, and they very well could. Syracuse traveling all the way out to Las Vegas is going to be really, really interesting to see how that kind of affects things. And we have a couple of ACC teams heading out west, and I'll talk about them a little bit later in the show. But Jacob DeJesus is a guy that I want you guys to watch because everyone's going to be chasing around Ricky White. It's an absolute nightmare to keep track of that guy. And frankly, I don't know if Syracuse has the dudes to do it, but I know that they don't have the dudes to keep track of Jacob DeJesus and Ricky White. So when you're chasing around Ricky White, when you're dealing with all the stuff that he can do, Jacob DeJesus might just break a 60-yard touchdown catch and totally change this game on a dime. And then you have Jalen Catalon. This is a kid that's really, really talented. He is a Power 4 talent. He has played at Arkansas. He has played at Texas. Injuries have just gotten in the way. That's really the end-all, be-all with this kid. Talent has not been an issue. And he's been playing really good football for UNLV. He's finally healthy. He's finally playing this game every single week. And it's really special to watch him when he is. He's so much fun to watch, and definitely one of those guys that when you're playing a team that's in the Power 4, you got to have a little bit of talent that matches them, and this is definitely some talent that matches what Syracuse has, maybe even goes over what Syracuse has on that defensive backfield. And then you got LaQuint Allen. This is the guy that has to take over for Syracuse. I know the passing game is a huge part of this, and absolutely that will be utilized in this game. you're going to have to be able to run the ball because UNLV's offense is terrifying. There are so many different things that they do, and they're going to tire out your defense. If you can't run the ball in this game, you're cooked if you're Syracuse. There's no way you're going to be able to win this game if you can't slow down the clock, keep that offense on the sideline, and make sure your defense doesn't have to deal with all of the craziness that they're going to throw at them. And then on that defensive side, Derek McDonald's going to have his hands full. He's the leading tackler for this team at the linebacker position, and it's going to be a lot of stuff that he's going to have to deal with, that he's going to have to disseminate to everyone. Believe he's the green dot guy. Could be wrong there, but I'm 90% sure he is the green dot player for this team, and he's going to have his hands full. There's no two ways about that because he's got some really special players on the other side. Keys to this game, Haj and Ricky, they're magic. They're absolutely incredible to watch, and Ricky White is one of the best wide receivers in the entire country. They just hadn't unlocked him. They just hadn't gotten him the ball the way that they needed to in the first couple of games, pretty much because of the quarterback. Let's just be totally honest. But first 3 weeks, 10 catches, 127 yards, 3 touchdowns. On Saturday alone, he had 10 catches, 127 yards, 2 touchdowns. He is incredible, and Haj Malik Williams is his quarterback. So it's going to be incredible to watch this unfold, and they're one of those stories that could become more and more incredible throughout the season. Syracuse has to give Kyle McCord time. UNLV had 4 sacks and was all over the place last week. They were an absolute nightmare to deal with for Fresno State, and Syracuse could have the exact same fate. And Kyle McCord absolutely can dissect this defense. He absolutely can make a big-time impression on this game, but he can't do it if he's on his back. So you got to make sure he's upright. You got to make sure you give him an extra blocker from time to time and just put him in his position to succeed. Definitely a guy that has a ton of talent, but Syracuse or UNLV is going to come after him in a hurry, and they're going to have to make sure they're ready to roll. And then Syracuse discipline. UNLV's offense is so much eye candy. There's so many running backs there's at least 2 running backs on the field pretty much every snap. There's so much motion, personnel groupings, everything that you have to keep track of. If Syracuse isn't disciplined, if they miss a run fit, if they are lazy getting out to the outside of the field, they are going to get taken advantage of. They're going to get dominated on the offensive side of the ball, and they're going to have to figure out a way to, at the very least, just keep their feet under them. Make sure you don't overcommit to a run. Make sure you don't overcommit to a deep pass. Just make sure you keep this team under wraps because they can make big plays pretty much anywhere on the field. I do think UNLV gets this win. I just think they're a better team. I'll be totally honest with you. I understand that Syracuse is the ACC team. They probably have a little bit better of a recruiting profile. They probably have a little bit better of athletes. UNLV is just the better team. They have so many big-time playmakers. They have a quarterback that, frankly, I think is better than the one that just walked out the door, and they have so many different playmakers on that offense. I think UNLV gets their 3rd Power 4 win of the year, which sounds insane, but it's really not that insane if you watch this UNLV team even a little bit because they are downright special. A couple of really big games on Friday. There's no two ways about that. I think this Friday slate is obviously UNLV Syracuse is the main event of the week or of that day, but there are a couple others. That Oregon-Michigan State game obviously is going to be a little bit tough for Michigan State to make some noise, but Aiden Charles is worth your time. I can absolutely promise you that. And then TCU Houston is just one of those that I just kind of have a gut feeling about. I kind of just feel like it's going to be a little bit closer than people are wanting it to be, especially in Fort Worth. So going to be really fun to watch that. But let's take our second break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about all the upset alerts around the country. Frankly, I could go even deeper than what I went, but I have 6 for you right after this, so stick with us.